Hey WBE fans, it's your friend Choice CJ here. I'm here with my good buddy, General Tar Heel. What's up, Ben? Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. It feels good to be back and be in front of all you wonderful people once again, providing you with the best analyst content out there, because we are your favorite analysts. Don't forget it. Everyone else is worse than us. But it's feeling pretty good to be back, even though I was on vacation. But now that my sunburn is healed, I am here and ready to talk about these wonderful games.
Oh man, that's not sunburn, that's sun armor, dude. You're protecting yourself for when you go out in the future.
I never want to go outside again. I am a gamer. I prefer to stay inside and game. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, in case you guys do not know what we do here in this video, this is the Pickems video. What we do is we look at this, the total collection of games for each week, and we decide who is going to be most likely to be the victor, and then we review, you know, in the next week who had the best results. And so this is going to be week number 10, of course. We're going to review all of the week 9 games, and there are some ups and downs amongst our analysts. Some did pretty well. Some did, unfortunately, very poorly. Kraselke is sort of bringing up the rear there with a 3-11 record. But I think the big story coming out of this week, Ben, is that Kyle A. and the Miami Dolphins, the team who has never lost, has finally won their first game. And it was just, I don't know that you're just getting back from your vacation. I don't know if you had quite a chance to watch. It just seems like Nate had some good win cons, but got overwhelmed by the weather.
No, it's just crazy that once again Kyle picked up his first dub, so now every team in this league does have a W under their belt, and that's very good to see always once again, to make sure our coaches are always at least grabbing one dub for the season for sure. Yeah,
definitely. And then the other crazy game that I want to point out is that we have another win going into the win column for Old Man Tup at the Pittsburgh Piratitas, getting a win over Game Boy Luke in his Bristol City Blazekins. So that is, I think, now the third win for Tup this season. So he started off like 0-4, 0-5, and so he's very much rebounded in these last couple of games. So quite happy for him. I haven't had a chance to watch it. At the time that we're recording, the battle only just went up. So I don't know about you, Ben. I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I am going to be checking that out very soon.
I haven't checked it out either, but you know, Tup's an old man, so it takes a little bit for him to start get going. So now that he finally is picking up his wins, maybe we'll see him pick a little bit more up for the rest of the season.
For sure. In terms of the overall standings, Ben, you are still at the top. You have a record of 95-31. Uzi Gunner is still in second, and the fans, by winning percentage, are right up there. They are doing very well, right up there with you guys. The rest of us are sort of doing okay.
95-31, looking pretty solid. I hope someone catches up to me at one point. Not really, because I'm staying first, but it's okay. We'll see what you guys are able to do at the fans' home.
Very good. So a quick little bit of housekeeping before we get into the video proper. You probably saw on the Twitter page, but in case you did not, we're actually having a coach change going into week 10. Game Boy Luke and the Bristol City Blazekins are unfortunately going to be dropping out. They're going to be replaced by none other than Bill Standish and his Adelaide Haunchcrodes. Bill was very instrumental in getting WBE off the ground this season. He did all of the graphics, so it's cool to see him get that opportunity, and we're going to have to see if he's able to carry on with Luke's record, which is pretty respectable coming into Week 10. He has a 5-4 record with that team. Without further ado, let's hop on into the analysis of the Week 10 games. Ben, why don't you kick us off?
Don't mind if I do. For the first game, we have the Durham Dragons, coached by 6-foot Hacks, going up against the Melbourne Rotoms and Cybertron. This overall is a tough matchup for the Durham offense to break the strong defensive walls of Mega Slowbro, Aromatisse, and Blissey on the Melbourne Rotoms. Just does a decent job versus the Mega Low Punny, the Manaphy, the Como, everything of the sort. Does pretty solid in that aspect, but Curse Muck can easily abuse the team of the Melbourne Rotoms. I feel like it can set up pretty freely once the Mamoswine is definitely dealt with, or if you're just somehow able to get plenty of curses to where Mamo's EQ isn't doing much in the end, you're able to KO it. That's going to be a little bit skeptical, because I'm pretty sure Cybertron's going to know not to let that thing set up for free as long as you do have Mamo in the back. So once Mamo is checked, I do feel like a Curse Muck is just absolutely going to blow apart this team. But with the Lando, a Bandit or Life Orb Mamoswine does heavy damage to the Durham Dragons this game, 1,000,000%, and it really helps up for some of the fast sweepers in the back, such as Selgor or Katana to clean up late game. When you're looking at Mamoswine, really the only thing that I might want to switch into is like maybe a defensive bulky Water Savali or Manaphy. Steelix can take a hit and like try to get off a Gyro Ball, but it can't really come in into 2 hits, especially if it's like Adamant Life Orb. going into an ISO crash and an EQ. Probably doesn't want to deal with that. Reuninclus isn't doing much either. So it's really going to be difficult for the Dragons to deal with that massive beast of Mamoswine. Most teams have difficulty with it in the first place. So as long as they're able to work around that decently, maybe with the bulky Savali, I think that's going to be pretty nice. Because you will want Savali with Defog this game, looking into it, because a spike stacking a Selgor is looking pretty threatening, especially when your only other hazard removal is the Moltres on the team. That's not very helpful if you're looking at coming in on rocks and taking that 50%, of course. Yes, Defog Moltres is something that you can bring, but it's always not the best, especially when Savali is pretty decent in general, and if you do have to bring it for bulky support. Other than that, in offensive fighting, Savali could be pretty helpful, of course, dealing with some of the bulky normal types in Miltank and Blissey. You're also able to hit Kartana, Mamoswine, and the Guzzlord, and of course you do have coverage to deal with things such as the Slowbro and Aromatisse. So in the end, I had to still opt to go with the Durham Dragons and 6-foot hacks, because Leo is always performing so well every game. The only two analysts deciding to go up against me this week is going to be Aaron2420 and Chris Selke, who opted to go with the Melbourne Rotoms.
Our next game is going to be between the Pittsburgh Piratitas and Old Man Tup versus the Florida Gators, coached by its Gator. So I'm not going to lie, this is a little bit of an annoying matchup for Gator. Just because, like, there's a lot of Pokemon on Tup's team that forces, like, specific sets from him. One of those Pokemon, I think, is going to be Mega Charizard X. It's going to be forcing, like, either a Shuka Berry or Air Balloon Heatran in order to check Charizard. But even that is kind of tough because Heatran doesn't have an amazing way to threaten back Charizard X. If it, takes that Earthquake or dodges the Earthquake and goes for, like, Earth Power in retaliation, it's not going to be able to one-shot. So maybe he also runs something like Scarf Keldeo in combination, which, again, probably won't be able to one-shot Zard X, but at least has, like, a fairly powerful stab-type move off of a very large base special attack to hit it. Things like physically defensive Donphan also would be a natural way to check Zard, but Donphan's in a tough position because it's kind of pressured to check Tyranitar, which just looks very, very scary this game. The only Dark Resist on Gator's team is the Keldeo, and then also, of course, the Heracross, but Heracross doesn't really want to take, like, a Stone Edge. So then you're left with Keldeo as being, like, the Pokemon to switch into that, but again, I already said it's trying to maybe check the Charizard. And you can always run, like, Thunder Punch or something for Keldeo if you have, like, a Dragon Dance set or a Rock Polish set. Additionally, I think Rotom is a really big nuisance this game, just because the only way to deal with it is going to be the Celebi. Celebi can be easily, worn down with, like, Signal Beam, catching that on the prediction, or just by going straight for a Volt Switch, and then bringing in the Zard, which Celebi does not want to be in front of. Or he could even, if he wants to go like a hazard stack route, he could easily pivot into something like Klefki and start going for spikes. So it's a kind of an awkward way to have to prep, just because, like, it's a very restrictive matchup for Gator. Like, his best win con, I would say, overall is Keldeo, like Calm Mind, just with, like, stabs and then maybe, like, Icy Wind would be really good. I think even, like, a Swords Dance set would be kind of cheeky. You can run, like, Aqua Jet for the Dugtrio if you really want. But yeah, even though I think the matchup is a little bit awkward, I'm still going to be picking Gator in this game. All of our analysts are going to be picking Gator. It's just hard to pick against him when he has such a great record in WBE. And even though I complimented Tup for his season's turnaround, I just can't go in favor of him in this game. Maybe Tup will punish me for that, like he's punished us the last couple of weeks. Ben, anything to add?
Tup can definitely prove at this point that he is capable of doing so and proving us wrong. But once again, like you said, it is so hard to vote against Gator, whether it's been how well he's been doing the WBE season so far in general, or just even as a coach. Like, Gator is just so reliable, and I know he'll do well even in a poor matchup, so that's why I decided to go with Gator as well. And for the next match, we have the Sin City Scissors, coached by Patty Trills, going up against the Maryland Torterrapins and Under the Radar. For this match, I would really want to see an Agility Baton Pass Scyther going into Leaf Storm, HP Fire, Dragon Pulse Superior, because the contrary won't take into effect that speed boost, of course. It will only matter once the superior is actually getting the gain or the loss of the stats. So with that boost, you're able to, of course, outspeed the Mega Zam and the Rabombe, and I could really see superior just winning. Yes, the goal back could be a little bit of pain if that decides to come, or Incineroar in general, but if that happens late game and you're getting off a lot of chip, I feel like that is a definite possibility, and I would love to see Kelly pull something like that off. That would definitely be pretty cheeky, so hopefully be able to see that. On the other hand, Rabombe on the Sin City Scissors side is looking like a definite issue. It can freely just run Life Orb with coverage and do heavy damage versus the Terrapin's team. You really want to make sure to never allow that thing to get a free Quiver Dance. If you do run it a little bit bulkier, it might be able to versus some of the Torterrapin's teams, such as Mesprit. But other than that, Rabombe really just wants to click attacking moves and do as much chip as possible to the Torterrapin's team. You could, in theory, run like a Choice Specs with just like Moonblast and try to do as much damage as you can, because the Choice Specs, Rabombe is slept on majority of the time, and that thing does a massive amount of damage. But it might honestly be the best option when you're looking at like Milotic in the back with that nice strong special defensive bulk, as well as like the potential in Mesprit and Sableye being kind of Spadef bulky to help deal with the Mega Zam. But the only reason you wouldn't really want to be locked in is if you could potentially go for a hidden power fighting on the stack attack and potentially take it out. But you do risk, of course, that stack attack being Chople. It's almost 50% every time a stack attack comes that is Choppleberry or Shucka, so you have to be aware of that. Raichu, however, is being a great pivot for the Scizors team this week, and it's going to do a very solid job of weakening the team, just like Rabombe does, whether that makes Rabombe the cleanup or Raichu cleanup, because the only ground they have on the Marlentor Terrapin's team is the Zygarde. You can freely run HP Ice, and by no means are you going to be able to one-shot that thing because of how bulky Zygarde is, but either way, you're going to be getting a lot of Volt Switch momentum off of this team, and that's going to be beneficial in the long run. While on the Torterrapin's team, they do have a Alolan Raichu, but that's going to be a little bit more difficult for them because the Sin City Scizors do have two ground types in Landorus Therian and the Seismitoad, so it makes it really difficult there, as well as you have Ferrothorn just walling off both of their stabs pretty easily in Electric and Psychic. So even if you run HP Fire with that, then you have to just use only Psychic moves versus Lando and Seismitoad, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but once again, there is the Electric immunity in Raichu in the back. And then you also have the Psychic immunity in Incineroar. So in the long run, normal Raichu is a really good matchup versus Torterrapins, while Alolan Raichu is a poor matchup versus the Scizors. And when it came down to it this week, I just had to go with the Maryland Torterrapins and under the radar. Kelly proves to always be doing good every week, and every analyst decided to agree with me except for Aeron2420, of course going and using his lock-in for Patty Trails like he does every week, while I decided to lock in for Kelly myself. CJ, you want to tell me why I decided to go with the Torterrapins this week?
Kind of the same for you. Like, going against Kelly is always tough, especially when he's a good pal. It was nice enough to come on the show last week. And so, yeah, I like the sets that you brought up. If he doesn't want to bring the Agility Baton Pass, I think just like a Scarf Scyther with a U-Turn, Aerial Ace, knockoff, and then something cheeky like HP Ice maybe to catch a Lando off guard. Would be pretty useful as well. I just think that the stabs are pretty problematic for Patty's team. It's always tough to pick against Patty because he has one of the scariest squads in the whole WBE, but I like Kelly this week.
I agree. It's going to be really tough to deal with Kelly after we got dinner and fueled up on Hooters. So Patty's got to be pretty aware of how strong Kelly's feeling this week.
That's right. In the next game, we have our brand new coach in the WBE, Bill Standish, and his Adelaide Honchcrows going up against Lord Envy and the San Diego Chim Chargers. Now, after week 10, the Honchcrows are going to be looking a little bit different. They're going to have a couple of transactions being made, but for this week, he is going to be using the roster that was inherited from Game Boy Luke. So for that reason, like, it's not something that he's going to be totally familiar with, and he doesn't even have the chance to change too many mons. So I think that it's going to be a little bit of a handicap for Bill just coming into the game at all. Just looking at the mons on paper, there's a few things on Envy's side that I think are very potent. I quite like a workup Mega Sableye. If you run Leaf Blade plus HP Fire and then a final coverage move like Earthquake or Low Kick, I think that it has a lot of potential. There's just not a lot of Pokemon on Bill's team that's going to be able to stop that. Maybe a bulky Delmice or Drampa. And it has a very good speed tier, really only being threatened by like a potential Scarf Lando if he chooses to bring that. Or like Scarf Aerodactyl, I guess. But Scarf Aerodactyl is just kind of an odd bring. So we'll have to see that. And the other problem, of course, with like a Scarf Lando is that it's not the best set of Lando. It's pretty easily checked by Rotom Ghost this week. So yeah, I think that overall the Workup Subtile looks very good. I quite like the breaking potential of Victini this week with Fire, Electric, and Fighting coverage. It's going to break through almost the entirety of Bill's team, and it's at a pretty nice speed tier, being able to outspeed basically anything but Aerodactyl and Lando. If it's just without a non-speed boosting item, if it's like Twist Scarf or something, then obviously that helps neutralize that even further. Victini is kind of pressured to deal damage to Scizor, because Scizor can be a little problematic otherwise, but Scizor is kind of checked as well by like Rotom and Registeel, so that's quite nice. It's not going to be totally reliant to break Scizor. On Bill's side, I think that his best offensive bet is going to be Necrozma with Photon Geyser and ground coverage, either Earthquake or Earth Power if he says to go physical or special. And I would probably run it just with like a straight up Double Dance set, so bring like Rock Polish plus SD or Rock Polish plus Calm Mind, and I think that that's pretty spooky. Like the best responses to the Psychic type moves on Envy's team are of course going to be the Drapion and the Registeel. Both of those are going to be weak to the ground type coverage, so I quite like that. So I'm going to be going in favor of Envy in this game. All the analysts are going to be agreeing. But hopefully Bill, once he gets his team kind of customized for him in the next week, he'll be having some slightly more favorable matchups for the final weeks of the season. Ben, any other comments?
Just like we've been saying about the past few coaches, it's really hard to go vote against Envy, and it's even more difficult joining the league in your first game immediately being Envy, so that's kind of unfortunate for Bill, but I really do hope he makes plenty of transactions in the coming week to change up this team, because I always haven't been the biggest fan of this roster that Luke made. He did very well with it, and he's definitely still put this team in playoff contention, but I really hope to see what Bill's able to make out of this team. For the next game, we have the Bullet Punch Club, coached by Uzi Gunner, going up against the New York Noibats and Mewtwo fan Nate. Into this matchup, I see an offensive Arcanine being very difficult for the Noibats to switch into. It also opens up great doors for Mega Aerodactyl once walls are weakened. I'm mainly looking at the Mega Steelix and the Slowking. Both of those are kind of threatened by the Arcanine and being direct checks to Mega Aero. Slowking might be his ideal check to an offensive Arcanine, but of course Arcanine can abuse that Wild Charge coverage in order to hit Slowking. As long as you're wearing Slowking down, you're helping Mega Aero in the long run, as well as just dealing with the Steelix if you're able to get off a nice strong Flare Blitz versus that. I don't know if it OHKO because Steelix is just that fat, but at the very least you're getting it in range of EQ for Mega Aero, which can be very important, because if they don't bring a proper Scarf from the Noibats team, Mega Aero can definitely just clean up once you get chip off of the remaining walls, so that's something you have to be aware of. Thundurus, however, with Fight Z, could do a great hurting to the Bullet Punch Club, along with coverage in Thunderbolt and Psychic, and then potentially like Substitute as the last move, because that really just destroys the defensive core for the Bullet Punch Club, while the only way they really want to revenge kill that is definitely with Mega Aero once again. So if you are able to make it at least harder for Mega Aero to come out freely, that's going to be helpful, so Rocks might be something to look into here. Because Thundurus can put in a hurting to the entire team. The Fight C also helps you versus the Rhyperior sitting in the back. It's not only to potentially like blow apart the Licky, so you can use it on either of those, because I really don't see both of those Pokemon coming this week. So once again, as long as you save it for one or the other, then that's going to be putting Thundurus in a great spot. I really don't know if you're going to be able to get off like an Agility or a Nasty Plot as the last move, even though that would be helpful really just to cancel like the Aerodactyl coming in. Majority of the time I don't really see you like setting up for free entirely. Nasty Plot would be pretty helpful for just the amount of bulk that the Bullet Punch Club has between stuff like the Licky, the Amoonguss, and the Uxie, but I don't really see it being too much of a necessary thing. You could also just be Prankster with Thunder Wave if you really wanted to screw over the Mega Aerodactyl and Mean Shao. But those three coverage moves is definitely looking pretty solid to break apart the bulk that the Bullet Punch Club has. While double choice specs on the New York Noibats is looking pretty handy when it comes to Swellow and Sylveon, those things are pretty hard to switch into for the Bullet Punch Club. Offensive Sylveon is looking great, period, because the only Fairy Resist that the Bullet Punch Club has is Arcanine, which is neutral to the Psyshock or whatever, and then Amoonguss, which is super effectively weak, or just weak to psychic coverage in general. So Sylveon's going to abuse it like that, and of course we know how much a Boom Burst Swellow does in general, so that's going to be pretty helpful for the team. There's no soundproof Pokemon that you have to be aware of. You're getting a good pivot with U-Turn as well. You can run like Scarf Swellow, I guess, if you want to, but you're not really going to be getting any coverage for Mega Aerodactyl. If anything, you'd just be countering like another Scarf Meanchow that could be a threat or something of the sort. So I'm just looking for very strong, especially offensive Pokemon for the Noibats this week. You might be able to throw Lucario in somewhere and get off a little bit of physical chip and throw the team apart, but I'm really just seeing their special Pokemon do well this week like they typically do every week. But when it came down to it, I decided to vote for the Bullet Punch Club and Uzi Gunner, and for the analysts, it was only Aaron 2420, Itsock, and Chris Selke decided to go for New York Noibats, while we did have a lock-in for Dr. Slacking with the Bullet Punch Club. CJ, you want to tell me why you decided to go with Uzi Gunner this week?
I think there's some cool stuff that Nate could run. The nice thing about the Aerodactyl on the other side for Nate is that he does have some super effective priority for dealing with it. So it could be scary if he doesn't preserve the priority in the back, like the Bullet Punch on Lucario and Ice Shard on Cloyster. But yeah, Aerodactyl can otherwise apply a lot of pressure. One thing that is unfortunate about Uzi's team is that it's very weak to Dark type, so I think Hydreigon spamming Dark Pulse could be very good here. He's very reliant on Tapu Fini to deal with that, so I think a cool tech would be to run Poisonium Z on Hydreigon and boost the Belch to hit it with a very powerful Acid Downpour and potentially take it out in one hit. We'll see if Nate decides to bring that or not. But, you know, you look at the performances here, Nate is on a little bit of a downward turn, whereas Uzi is 3-1 since taking over for Sacred in this league. So he's definitely trending up, and so I think that he's going to be favored here. In the next game, we're going to be looking at the Seattle Sea Kings, coached by Joe Dorr, and his opponent, the Miami Dolphins, coached by Kyle A. So it's definitely a tricky matchup for Joe because weather is a little spooky versus him. Rain, I think, is particularly useful because Kingdra can outpace a potential Unburden boosted Slurpuff if it comes down to it. So he can use that to potentially throw off a very powerful Hydro Pump or Waterfall versus Slurpuff and maybe take it out. And then just in general, Kingdra is hard to deal with. You do have Aloe and potentially the Venu to kind of wall it, but neither of those Pokemon really appreciate the Dragon-type moves, and Venu is neutered by the Rain because its Synthesis is not full-powered. Basically, I think the best checks to weather are going to be like Wish Protect Aloe or Wish Protect Umbreon. Umbreon is a little bit more preferred because it can check both the Victory Bell and the Kingdra if needed. On Joe's side, there's one win con that I think I like more than any other, and that is going to be Sigilyph with Cosmic Power and Stored Power, Roost, and Toxic. So if you look at Kyle's team, he is very, very vulnerable to opposing Psychic types. He does not have a Dark type on his team, and his only resist, period, is Cresselia. And so, like, not only can the Sigilyph win out if it gets enough boosts off, but if you can throw off a Toxic versus that thing, it's going to be able to wear it down very, very easily, and there's very little that Cresselia can do to weaken it if it has one or two Cosmic Power boosts. So I think that's going to be the best win con on Joe's side. The second best win con is probably going to be some sort of Bisharp. So he is Kyle is equally weak to Dark as he is to Psychic. He has only one resist to Dark, being the Diancie, and of course that's just sitting there prime for the 4 times weak Steel move coming off of that Bisharp. I don't think he can run like a SD set with Bisharp. There's not really anything that he can set up on, but maybe he just runs like a plain Life Orb or Banded set and tries to do as much damage as possible. I think that that's going to be his overall best option. While I'm glad that Kyle finally got a win in the last game versus Nate, and he has some positives in this matchup, I think I like Joe's positives just a little bit better. So I'm going to be picking him in this game. It's mostly looking like analysts are picking Joe as well. We have just Jacob, as always, going in favor of Kyle, actually locking Kyle in this game. Very bold choice. I respect it.
For the next game, we have the Nuzleafs, coached by Automatic, going against the Milwaukee Sawsbucks and Magnitude. For this matchup, I'm looking at Choice Specs and Mega Amen. out there for Regulator with the Choice Specs and Mega doing plenty of damage in this matchup for sure. It's just really difficult to switch into 1,000,000%. You might have Scizor as a quote-unquote resist in the back, but with its Spadef and of course the Tinted Lens boost, I believe, it's just going to be doing heavy damage, and it's just too much to deal with. It's really going to put in a lot of work and just break apart walls, while you also have a Trick Room offensive Slowbro with potential to both abuse and counter rain. You get the boosted Scald, which is pretty helpful, and of course you get the Psychic coverage to hit the only grass type on the team in Chestnut, as well as you have the Psychic coverage for potential water resistant Quillfish. Olin Persian's getting hit by the stronger boosted Scald and the rain, most likely. And Trick Room in general helps counter Swampert because the Slowbro's natural bulk, no matter what, it's taking an EQ unless Swampert somehow gets like powered up punch or something of the sort. Either way, you're getting off a Trick Room, and if you're not able to KO it, even though Slowbro does get the Grass Knot coverage to help with that, you still are going to be able to deal with it with something slower in the back. Like, you can easily bring in like Tangela if you wanted to and literally threaten that thing out with like just a Giga Drain. So that's something you have to be aware of right there, how Trick Room can easily counter the speed boosting rain. While the Sawsbucks do overall struggle to break apart the Nuzleafs, I believe, and just deal with the offense in general, I really do think this is a poor matchup for them. I don't really think anything that could come out too well. Maybe like a pretty offensive Thunderous Therian and a Zelf is really going to be carrying them. Try to pivot with the Lone Persian the best you can, but I really just find it like it's going to be pretty difficult to break Clefable, as well as dealing with Pokemon such as the Latios and Raikou, especially when Raikou could probably deal with the Thunders pretty handily, I'd have to say. So just when it comes down to that, I feel like this matchup is pretty poor for the Sawsbucks, and Automatic's been doing decent since he's taken over the team. Steve has been doing pretty well overall as well. They're probably in the same area with how well they've been playing these past few games and everything, but just when it comes down to matchup, I decided to go with the Nuzleafs. And for the rest of the analysts, everyone decided to agree with me except for Chris Cobain and Chris Selke decided to go with the Sawsbucks. CJ, you want to give me any more expertise here?
I really like that Slowbro set that you proposed. That really devastates Steve's team. I hope that Otto decides to bring that. Besides that, like, I think there's some weaknesses on Otto's team. Like, he's a little bit vulnerable to electric types. So, like, Thundurus, I think, could have a pretty good matchup. But it's tough because it also needs to pack coverage for Latios, and it kind of wants, like, Sludge Wave for Tangela and Clefable as well. So it doesn't really that effectively run, like, setup sets. You need basically the electric plus the poison plus, like, HP Water for Camel. So we'll see if he cooks up anything really crazy. I like the way it's looking for Automatic otherwise. The next matchup is going to be between the Chicago Cubchus and Galactic Elliot. His opponent is going to be the Atlanta Umbreons, coached by Faint Attacks, aka Christian. I feel like I say this every time we analyze games for Christian. Mega Gardevoir is really scary here. In this matchup in particular, I think it's scary because it outspeeds 80% of Elliot's team. And the two Mons that do outspeed it, the Scolipede and the Ninetales, are kind of easily dealt with. Christian does have double steals to potentially switch into those two Pokemon and threaten them with powerful attacks. And then they also have in the back double priority on Entei and Dragonite. So neither Scolipede nor Ninetales are very bulky, so even though they outspeed, they're not going to be able to hit those Pokemon very hard. They're going to be taking a lot of damage from E-Speed thanks to their lack of good physical bulk. Besides that, just in general, I think, like I said, FD Knight's looking pretty good. There's just not a lot of ways to outspeed it. And I think like Z-Dragon to nuke Serena, Mantine, things like that, it's going to be looking very nice. And then probably just put EQ in the last slot, EQ to hit like Sandslash and I guess Ninetales. Those are going to be the most powerful options that he has for that. Maybe he runs like a Fire Punch instead, but I think like for Ninetales in particular, you're not going to want to click Fire Punch versus that since it does have the outside chance to run Ice Shard. If I were Galactic Elliot, I would definitely bring a Scarf Hoopa. There are no Dark Resists, period. For Christian, like basically his Fairy type has a secondary Psychic typing that makes it weak to it. He does not have a Fighting type. He doesn't have a Dark type of his own. So yeah, just bring Scarf's Hyperspace Fury, spam it, should do very well. in the late game. Maybe you bring it in combination with like a Spike Scolipede to really apply lots of pressure, to chip things down and get them in range of that Scarf Hyperspace Fury. Alternatively, if he doesn't want to bring spikes, I do like the option of speed passing Scolipede going into Garchomp. I think you just run the stabs plus HP Fire and potentially Poison Jab to hit Gardevoir, and that Garchomp looks really deadly. Like, what is the response to it? I guess it doesn't even have to be HP Fire. It could be Fire Blast for maximum power. It just depends on how comfortable he is with dodging moves and stuff like that. At the end of the day, I am going to be going in favor of Elliot. It's not all good in this matchup. There are some difficulties, like I was saying, with Gardevoir, but I like the Garchomp and the Hoopa options. Looks like the rest of the analysts are going to be going in favor of Elliot as well. This one might also just come down to record. Christian has not been doing terribly, but he is currently outside of the playoff picture, whereas Elliot is actually looking pretty good for playoffs. Ben, do you have anything to say about this matchup?
I just have to go on Elliot's side 1,000,000%. He's my boy. He's been doing pretty well, and I definitely see Mega Garchomp doing plenty of work in this matchup. Honestly, it's going to be a little bit questionable probably. Maybe I could be wrong about this, but since Chomp is so bulky, it might honestly be able to live a Mega Gardevoir Hyper Voice if you're brave enough, question mark, and just outright KO it with a Poison Jab, and then that threat is gone. So that's something you might want to look into when you're building, because that thing is just really bulky, but of course Mega Gardevoir is stupid strong. So just have to be aware of that. But in general, Mega Chomp has a great matchup, and that's something I'm definitely looking forward to. I would like to see a Christian use Durant pretty well in this matchup as well, however, because of course it does get the rock coverage for majority of the team in like Rotom Fan, Chandelure, Mantine, while having the Bug Stab to hit like Serena, and then of course you can still hit like Girder with at least a strong Iron Head if you want to. You're blowing back Alolan Ninetales. You're killing like 5 Alolan Ninetales with that Hustle Iron Head.
Yes.
So he definitely could definitely use the Durant pretty well this week, I feel like. So that's the only other thing I could add. In the next matchup, we have the Pittsburgh Pichus, coached by Numnexus, going against the Rochester Rhydons and Iron Boffin. For this matchup, I'm seeing an Assault Vest Sap Sipper Goodra playing a big role in this game. It's an important counter to both a pivoting Hidden Power Grass Jolteon that wants to really just Volt Switch, get off T-Bolt damage if it can. Of course, click Hidden Power Grass if that Swampert is in, or if Boff is over predicting and expecting it to come in. While I see a Life Orb Shaman wanting to come and just doing a decent amount of work, because in general, you have decent switch-ins to Shaman, but in the end, Shaman's always a decent mon just to bring, because it is pretty reliable. Whether or not it actually comes is pretty questionable, but still, just having that Goodra in the back is going to be good. If you're not really too worried about the Shaman, you could opt to bring like a berry-reducing Goodra, such as a Yachi Berry for Weavile, or a Fairy Berry for Altaria, and then you just click Sludge Wave, get rid of that, and then you click whatever to get rid of Weavile, basically. So that's definitely something that could happen. I wouldn't be surprised if that either. But as for Weavile, Weavile does just put in a strong amount of work versus the team. It can wall break entirely or just clean up late game. It's a very threatening Pokemon in this matchup. You do have to, however, be aware of Mega Medichamp's priority. That Fake Out's going to be doing a lot to Weavile, and of course you have the Bullet Punch to make sure you have the priority in the end. So even though Weavile will get the Ice Shard priority before the Bullet Punch from Mega Medicham, you just don't really want to deal with that, especially since you're going to have to get Chip off Medicham in general before Ice Shard's going to be able to pick that thing off. You can definitely run a Rocky Helmet Pokemon in the back to switch in on those priority moves, especially since I feel like Medicham has to go for the Fake Out versus the Weavile if it opts to come in and be the Revenge Killer. So that's something you could definitely abuse. Once you chip down Mega Medicham, you might be able just to win with Weavile and get off that Ice Shard to make sure you can win. A bulky Spiritomb is going to be an ideal counter to that Mega Medicham as well. You might want to just throw a Rocky Helmet on that thing, even though once again, if it goes for that Fake Out, you're not going to be touching it in the first place. So that is one thing you have to be aware of. But it is the best way to deal with it. You do get kind of free Will-O-Wisp spam, even though Toxic is a little bit better on some of these bulkier walls, such as Swampert and Tangrowth and the Zapdos, all that good stuff. But a free Will-O-Wisp is a free Will-O-Wisp. Chip is chip. You're at least negating leftovers if you need to. And even though that Spiritomb does come in on the Mega Medicham, you do have to be aware that you're letting in a Choice Specs Exploud for absolutely free, and that is terrifying. Because they just, the Rochester Rhydons do not deal well at all with the Exploud. That thing is just about claiming a life each and every time. Assault Vest Metagross is probably going to be your best check to it. And even then, I don't really know if that's going to be the best overall for Metagross. It might want to be more of an offensive set, if anything, like Choice Band. I don't really think it'd benefit too much in AV apart from that Exploud, but just to make sure you're not dropping a Mon every turn, you might want to bring it, and just be aware of that. But when it came down to it, I had to just factor in how well the teams have been doing overall in the season. The Pichus have been on the rise, so I have to go for them this week over the Rochester Rhydons, while 3 analysts in Chris Cobain, Sock, and Chris Selke opted to go with the Rochester Rhydons and Iron Boffin this week. CJ, you want to let me know why you decided to go with the Pichus as well?
Yeah, basically they've had better performance this season than Boffin did. Although I neglected to mention at the start that he did pull off a very nice upset last week over Duncan Can't Die in his Freestate Horror Cats. So hats off for that. I just think that there's a lot of scary threats for Nexus this week, and just like with his general battling experience overall, I think he's going to take it over Boffin this week. The next match is going to be between a coach I just brought up in the last segment. It's Duncan Can't Die and his Free State Tour Cats going up against John, aka Pokemon, and of course he's the coach of the New Orleans Pelipers. It's been quite a roller coaster for John the last 2 weeks, getting a very nice 4-0 dub over A-Drive and then suffering a pretty tough 6-0 loss to Wolfie Glick in the most recent week. I don't think you can really chalk it up too much to him. I think you give a lot of the credit to Wolfie for that win, just bringing a really great Blastoise set. But it always is a little bit demoralizing, and I feel like John's one of those coaches who always takes those sorts of losses very hard. So we'll see if he can sort of rebound and get in the right mindset versus Duncan this week. It's definitely not going to be easy because I think there are some pretty scary threats coming out from Duncan. I quite like a Coil Zygarde 10 in this matchup. Basically, you just run the stabs plus E-Speed, and there's very little counterplay for that. Like, the E-Speed's really nice for hitting Zam, Scarf Diggersby, things like that. I like Coil over Dragon Dance because the speed's not really needed. And the Coil does make it just a little bit easier to take hits from like Sucker Punch, Toxicroak, Quick Attack, Diggersby, Shadow Sneak, Decidueye, and things like that. So I think that's pretty nice. The 2 main checks to that sort of Zygarde set are going to be the Vaporeon and the Mudsdale. Those are both easily checked by Duncan's Araquanid. I think that pivots in pretty much every time for free. There's not a whole lot that can be done about it. You look at John's big threats like Diancie and Salamence and things like that. I think they've sort of forced Duncan to run a Shukaberry Jirachi this week. I think that's going to be a pretty nice way to check both of those Pokemon. In a pinch, Shukaberry Jirachi is also nice for the Diggersby. Like, depending upon the setup, Diggersby, Jirachi still might not really appreciate the Earthquake. If it's Life Orb or if it's like a Swords Dance variant or something like that, we'll have to see. I do think that Duncan's going to have to be a little careful with the Jirachi just because Magneton does lurk in the back on John's side. It could potentially trap that Jirachi and throw off powerful T-Bolts. I think the Jirachi will have to run U-turn in order to pivot out of that. And I do think the Magneton is very likely to come because it's John's best way of damaging that Araquanid. As I mentioned, Araquanid is very important for Duncan in this game. All things considered, I am going to be leaning in favor of John this game. I don't think that he's going to take a loss again after that beating he took last week. I do think it's going to be pretty close. And I think the analyst votes mainly reflect that. It's 6-4 in favor of John. We've actually got one lock coming in from, it looks like, Sock. So it's going to be a very interesting one. I'm looking forward to watching it. Do you have any comments, Ben?
Ironically, in the middle of you talking, I'm in John's FO, and he actually just asked us about this matchup. So I was looking into that a little bit. John seems pretty comfortable about it, for sure. But he knows how the building goes on here, and he's a little bit afraid about a few things, for sure. Offense can benefit from one and also threaten the other. So it's just small things like that. I do feel like a few Pokemon are going to be a big factor in this, like the Diggersby, as you mentioned, as well as like the Hitmontop being a decent defensive check to that as well. But Mega Diancie is going to threaten a lot. Jirachi is definitely going to be bulky, everything of the sort. So it's really going to come down to just the proper coverage to deal with all the offensive threats on each side, because Zygarde is the big issue, Blacephalon is an issue, etc., etc. So this is definitely going to be a pretty offensive match in my opinion. And for the next match, we have the South Texas Sableyes, coached by Invivid Color, going up against the Minnesota Vikavolt and Dan, aka ADrive. This is going to be a pretty interesting battle this week for sure. Always two threats going up against one another. One potential threat to the KB is definitely just a speedy Stallbreaker Mew. I feel like that's the best way to deal with this. But in the end, that Mew is still going to just get destroyed by an Ice and EMZ Kyurem Black if he opts to bring that. So you definitely have to be careful how you play around KB this week. Aggron could definitely take an Earth Power or two, but even then it's not going to be the best check in the world, because once you switch in once, if you're switching in on like an Ice Beam into an Earth Power, you're not going to be able to really do it again, everything of the sort. You probably make Kyurem bulky enough too, to where it can definitely take a heavy slam because of Kyurem's great weight as well. Apart from that, I'm seeing Zoroark having a solid matchup. Apart from that, I'm definitely seeing Zoroark also have a solid matchup with its Dark Stab, and as well as just having coverage with like Sludge Bomb for the Tapu Bulu and everything of the sort. You can definitely have the Illusion set up as the Kyurem Black or the Passimian. That way you can bait in like Mew and definitely be able to kill off that, because Mew's definitely going to be one of those, just one of the Mews where it can be whatever this week. It's something where you always have to scout out for it and be as careful as possible playing around it, because if you are so set on a Mew being one set, you will lose to the other set 1,000,000%. Always got to respect Mew. And as well as for the rest of the respect, Dan has to respect both Webs, Galvantula, and Hawlucha in this matchup 1,000,000%. I feel like Galvantula does a decent job of breaking apart his fat and just doing well in general as chipping apart the team for that Hawlucha in the endgame. So Galvantula's plan is probably to get up Webs and just be annoying, because if you're not able to get that defog off with Skarmory or something of the sort, you're definitely going to be able to abuse that. Florges also has defog, but in the end, Hawlucha is looking pretty scary. Florges isn't the best defensive check to Hawlucha, as well as Intimidate Manectric, sure. I guess it's decent, but in the long run, you're still getting bought by a fighting type move. Like, you're going to have to be switching out and making sacks in order for that Hawlucha to be continuously reducing its attack stat. Also, if you just get the read on that and you get a substitute up with Hawlucha, then what are you going to do? You're going to be in a terrible situation at that point. So it's going to be really difficult for him to play around Hawlucha this week, and that's going to be the main threat. But in the end, I decided to go with Dan and the Minnesota Vikavolt. It's hard to go up against them, and Vivid's been having an iffy season so far, I'd have to say. Even though I do love him as a coach and a homie in general, I definitely just have to go with Dan, because he's been doing pretty solid with his team, even though I feel like the bulk that he continuously brings might be exploited this week. It's just something he has to be aware of. Pretty 50-50 among the analysts. Actually, majority of the analysts going in favor of the South Texas Sableyes. I think this is the first time Dan's been outvoted this week. 6-4 in the Sableyes favor. So, CJ, you want to tell me why you opted to go with Vivid this week?
Yeah, I just think it's a tough matchup. Vivid, like, he's definitely snuck up on me in terms of his record. He's 6-3 plus 23 right now. I think that's the second best differential in the league. So, tied with MV, so he's definitely like really snug up there. I think the matchup is tough. Like you mentioned, Webs are kind of annoying. It's going to be weakening Kyurem's ability to do a lot of damage and things like that. Manectric, it really relies on its speed tier. Mew with like sub Nasty Plot, I think just looks really scary. Then you can run Psychic plus Vacuum Wave. Vacuum Wave is really nice for Lycanroc and Zoroark. To hit those, I'm sure that at +2, but that move is going to take both of those Pokemon out. They're both are both very bad. For Dan, I think his best option offensively is going to be Talonflame, just because the dual stabs on that thing are impossible to deal with for Vivid. His best chance of like taking a +2 stab move from that thing is like Mega Aggron, which is hilarious to think about. And so for that reason, I think that like getting hazards off the field is going to be very important. Rocks is obviously going to be bad for Talonflame, and having the hazard removal is going to be nice anyway, because I do think that the Sticky Web is going to be an issue here. The next game is going to be between the New York Marauders, coached by MrTalent, aka Drew, and his opponent is going to be the Newcastle Nido Kings, and their coach, of course, is Patters. Patters also another coach who's having a pretty sneaky season. He is currently in possession of the last playoff spot in the Sword Division. I think in this game he'll probably be able to tally another victory to pad his total. I think he'll be able to do it on the backs of Pokemon like Venomoth. I think Venomoth has a really amazing matchup here. I know that you always like to point out how amazing Venomoth's matchups are. This week it truly is basically free Savage Spinout spam. There's no Pokemon on Drew's team, that's going to quad resist the bug type move, so basically he gets neutral Savage Spin Out versus everything. It's nice too because Sludge Bomb is going to be nice for hitting that Audino super effectively. Audino could potentially be annoying in this game. There's a few decent setup opportunities for the Venomoth, like Empoleon, Audino, Stunfisk, even Gourgeist. I would say all kind of give setup opportunities to that Venomoth. I think Escavalier is going to be another important Pokemon in this game, just because Audino can get a little bit out of hand unless you have that powerful stab type move to do damage to it. So both of those Pokemon, Venomoth and Escavalier, I think are going to come for sure. Tapu Koko, I think, is a pretty good matchup, all things considered. There are a few potential good checks in the Gourgeist and the Stunfisk, but Tapu Koko can, of course, pack pretty decent coverage for both of those Pokemon. I think more than anything, there's just not a good revenge killer on Drew's team for Tapu Koko. Like, there's just not like a natural Scarfer. I guess like Nihilego with like Scarf Sludge Wave would be nice for hitting the Tapu Koko, but like Sludge Wave is just so easy to switch into with having Escavalier, Hippowdon, Terrakion, things like that. So I don't think that's going to be super reliable this game. And of course, the option to run U-turn gives easy momentum on a Gourgeist switch-in or a Stunfisk switch-in. Like, you can easily go into Gyarados on both of those Pokemon, for example, or you can go into Escavalier to like Pursuit Trap Gourgeist or something like that. For Drew, I think his best overall shot at winning is going to be a simple Dragon Dance Gyarados. I really like that because you could run Fly Z with Bounce to hit some of the Pokemon that might not mind the Waterfall so much, like the Mega Gyarados or Executor. That Supersonic Sky Strike is going to do a lot of damage to Mega Gyarados at +1. And then you can just run regular Bounce versus some of the other Pokemon like Executor. That's definitely going to be annoying for it. That small chance to para is always really critical. Maybe you run Sub in the last slot. I think Sub is kind of nice because it can then like set up on Hippowdon. Scavalier is another good one that could get set up on. And then the ability to run Sub and dodge the Intimidate from the Mega Gyarados before it Mega Evolves, I think would be pretty clutch. This, there's not much else to speak of. I think on Drew's side, there's pretty good checks to a lot of the major win cons. Like, again, that Scarf Nihilego I don't think is all that potent here. Lottie, there's some decent checks to it, like Gyarados and Tapu Koko. Snorlax is also a pretty good Lottie check. So I'm going to be going in favor of Patters this game. We've got, looks like 3 coaches going in favor of Drew. So 7-3 in favor of Patters this game. You're actually one of the dissenters this week, Ben. Why are you going with your man, MrTalent?
I always like how he's been doing with his team, and I just feel like there's a few win cons for him for sure. I really like the DD Gyaro, like you pointed out. I feel like it can definitely just end up cleaning up versus his team. That Fly Z can definitely just blow back on the Executor or the Mega Gyarados. Other than that, like you said, Waterfall spam is pretty free versus the rest of the roster for the Nidokings. Stunfisk, I think, is one of the best counters to Tapu Koko. Of course, you have the Nidos first, but Stunfisk is definitely up there, and I feel like it's going to be doing really well in general because Ground and Electric, the only real thing you want to switch in on is a Powdon, and that's kind of like a free Toxic as long as you predict it. Because even if you're getting Toxic on Koko, that's kind of fine, especially if it's like a Calm Mind abuser. You do have to be aware of, like, I guess, Calm Mind Grass DMZ to deal with Stunfisk. Grass DMZ might still be less than Grass Knot. It really just depends on Stunfisk's weight, which I don't feel like is that much. But you do have also the Abuse and like Fake Out Ambipom to check the Tapu Koko, even though you don't have the best Scarfers in general to kind of revenge it. I guess Nihilego, but Nihilego doesn't do the best versus Powdon. But in the end, I just like with how well Drew has been doing this season, and he's brought some spice sometimes, and I feel like it's going to help him. Yes, I do want to see Venomoth do work, so it was kind of a little bit torn for me, but I just feel like Drew and MrTalent definitely could pull through this week. And for my last game this week, we have the Bronx Beartix, coached by Pokeaim MD, going up against the LA Spice and K-Cray. For this matchup, Crook has a field day versus the LA Spice. It spams knockoff and EQ the entire day. It can easily just run Superpower, also to deal with the Porygon 2. You can run Fight Z, but once you get that knockoff on the P2, its bulk is definitely lacking, and you might just be able to break it. I'm pretty sure an Adamant knockoff into a Superpower from, I think, a Dark Glasses Crocodile is enough to KO like a defensive Porygon 2 once it loses its Eviolite. Don't hold that against me, but I do like my Crocodile. I know majority of its calcs. But if Sun is gone and Rain gets up, that Kabutops is a definite threat versus the LA Spice. they really just don't deal with it that well in general. Especially if you deal with the Porygon 2 and knock off its Eviole with the Crocodile, like I mentioned. It's just having a field day versus the team. But once again, that Mimikyu is always in the back, just getting off damage no matter what, because of its fresh disguise ability to take a hit, which is going to be pretty important. But yeah, if you deal with that Ninetales and Rain gets up, that Kabutops is hitting free versus majority of the team. A lot of Kate Curry's team is weak to rock, and the rest is kind of weak to water. Lilligant's probably the only thing really going to be taking a hit. You do have Intimidating Mawile to somewhat deal with it too as well, I guess. But Mawile really hasn't been brought that much, and it's not that great of a Pokemon in general, I'd have to say. So you just have to be aware of that. As for K's team, Sun Mons can definitely abuse Toxapex with its poor attacks in Sun, because Toxapex already has that weak special attack, so Scald really been doing anything. And even with Liquidation in Sun, you could probably make it to where Toxapex doesn't break a substitute. So getting a sub versus that thing's going to be pretty abusive, especially if you're able to get a Nasty Plot off, either as Mega Houndoom or the Ninetales. Is going to be pretty important. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Heat-Proof Okaberry Bronzong to come for Joey this week to absolutely just cheese either Ninetales or the Mega Houndoom. Of course, 1,000,000% you go for the Dark Pulse versus the Bronzong, not to risk that, but I feel like just the Okaberry is there kind of to take apart the Ninetales and not worry about Sun anymore, especially if he does want to make that Kabutops his win con. Other than that, I feel like Volcarona might be able to abuse Sun in the counterpart for sure, and be able to work around that. But Crobat's just going to be a decent revenge killer when it comes to Pokemon such as the Mega Gallade, the Volcarona, the Comfey. That's a good matchup for all of them in general. So we're definitely going to see Crobat come this week, but it's just going to be more important to see what they opt to bring for the bulky part of the side for the Crobat, whether you just want to U-turn out versus everything or something of the sort. That's something you have to be aware of. So, of course, for this week, I decided to go with the Bronx Beartix and Joey. Almost impossible to vote against the majority of the time. But we actually have 3 analysts going in favor of the LA Spice this week, one being A on 2420, and of course we have Jacob as always going for her, and Chris Selke as well this week. And then we do have one locked for Chris Cobain on the Bronx Beartix. Do you have anything to add about that, CJ?
Nope. Joey's 9-0 and K is unfortunately 2-7. There's nothing really else to say. Joey should be favored to win this game.
Dang, just saying all blunt out like that.
Yeah, I mean, I like watching Kay's videos. She's very funny, and I like the way that she sort of breaks down each play, but you just can't top Joey this season. Sorry. Like, that's kind of all there is to it.
Can't blame you whatsoever.
Yeah. The last game of the week is going to be a fun one between the Milwaukee Bewares, coached by Wolfie Glick, and the Tennessee Trubbish, coached by Deathly I Am. So Wolfie is coming off of a really nice dub last week with a really cool workup sub Blastoise set, really catching John off guard. We'll have to see if he cooks up something equally spicy this week, although just on paper I don't quite see anything with that much potential, but I guess that's why Wolfie Gluck is a Pokemon World Champion and 2-time WBE Champion, is that he sees things that the rest of us don't. So, like, you know, if he wants to bring something cheeky like Z-Snatch Gengar, or like offensive Gigalith with like support from Trick Room Duosion with Explosion, that would really set up. Like, there's no rock resist really on Tyler's side, so I think that could be potentially pretty good. But looking at sort of the more traditional Pokemon, if you want to say it that way, I think this is actually a kind of tough matchup. You look at something like Excadrill, and it has kind of a bad matchup overall. Like Rotom, Mow, Gligar, Celesteela, and Kofag are all pretty good checks for Excadrill. It's also weak to Water Shuriken from the Greninja. And Excadrill can't even run like Toxic Lure sets, because obviously Celesteela is a Steel type and it can't get Toxic, and Gligar has the option to run Immunity, so it can't get Toxic. So that's a little bit tough. We'll have to see if like he brings some other sort of a reliably offensive Pokemon. Gengar is kind of tricky because it doesn't it's outsped by like Beedrill and Greninja, and like doesn't necessarily have the immediate power to like break something like Celesteela if it wants to go with like a Choice Scarf variant to outspeed them. Virizion is not going to be able to like go for like a Choice Scarf spam or anything like that. Blastoise is not as amazing here. I think Blastoise is going to be kind of pressured to be Spadef to deal with Greninja, so we'll have to see. On Deathly's side, I think that, setup Celesteela is always scary. it doesn't necessarily appear like it can break through Wolfie's team, but just watch. Like, let that thing get a +1 special attack boost and then throw off a Z move, and it can actually break surprisingly easily. Like, versus a max HP Mandibuzz, if you're like a modest Celesteela with +1 and you go for the Corkscrew Crash coming off of Flash Cannon, it does like 94% minimum to Mandibuzz, so it can actually break if it gets just 1 Z boost. If I were Wolfie, I think maybe the top tier tech to bring this week would be Endure, Custap Berry, Alolan Golem with Magnet Pull. So if the Celesteela gets out of hand, you can bring that thing in. You can go for the Endure on like the grass type move or the ground type move, whatever Celesteela decides to bring. And then you just throw off a max power wild charge versus that, and you don't have to worry about the speed because the Custap Berry, of course, gives you the max priority in your speed bracket. Like, it makes you the fastest in your speed bracket. So it could be a pretty nice way to revenge kill Celesteela. At the end of the day, like, the fact of the matter is Wolfie is 7-2 and Tyler is 1-8. I don't think that Tyler is going to all of a sudden dethrone Wolfie in this game. And I think a lot of our analysts feel the same way. We have just one going in favor of Tyler. I feel bad because I like Tyler as a person, but the cards are really just pulling in favor of Wolfie here.
Yeah, it's tough to go against the champ himself, and he just has an amazing matchup, I really do feel like. Celesteela is kind of a threat, but one thing I do like that he can run is the Sand Force Adamant Life Orb. Exadrill with Rock Slide. Sure, you're not going to have the Sand Rush in order to outspeed like a Mega Beedrill or Greninja, but Gren's going to be bringing that Water Shuriken anyways to out-prioritize your team. So if you are just wanting to break apart Celesteela, then you can do that, and then you can have other Pokemon roam free, which is pretty beneficial. But I really do like that Alolan Golem idea, and I would love to see that. I love Custap Berry in general, and it was a shame how long you went without having it. So, some people still forget that we have it now, and it can be abusive sometimes and definitely be a surprise to people. Alright everyone, but that's going to be it for the battles this week. There's definitely going to be a lot of amazing matchups going on, and of course we have the first battle for Bill Standish this week, so make sure to check that out and check out all the coaches in general. Make sure to drop a sub and look forward to all their content that they constantly put out for the WBE, whether that's their team builders or the actual battlers or anything else. Just support them as well with their other content because they do a great job, period. Once again, sub to the WBE if you haven't already. We're doing great on the analyst end, and we try our best to bring the best content to y'all because we are the best, period. So look forward to that, and once again, if you want to support even further, look down in the description and buy a shirt from us. We would really appreciate it. You can get one with the WBE logo or one of your favorite coach, and then tweet at us. Let us see how cute you look in it. But apart from that, you can also check out the Pokemon servers down below. Always got to plug that. They've been doing a great job, and they did have an update recently, I believe. So look into that. Minecraft is on the rise once again. And is there anything else you'd like to say, CJ?
Nope, that's it. Yeah, we're on the final few weeks of the WBE season. After this, just 3 more weeks of regular season. So this is do or die time for our coaches. Who's going to make the playoffs, who's not. Make sure you guys watch the videos this weekend so you can stay up to date on all the greatest action.
I promise I'm not going to cry when it comes to an end of these videos, guys. I promise. But if it happens, I blame CJ.
Okay,
I just get too emotional around him.
I have that effect on people sometimes.
Alright, buddy. But that's going to be doing it for us this week. So make sure to check out all the games once again, and we will see you guys next week. Deuces.
Peace.